Welcome to the African News Review podcast, where we cut through the noise and get to the truth. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and each week we are here to challenge the biases, prejudices, and misinformation in the Western press about Africa. Using historical context and contemporary insights, we set the record straight and reclaim the narrative. Tune in every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we uncover the real stories and reshape the conversations about Africa. This is the African News Review podcast, reclaiming Africa's narrative, one story at a time. Yes, greetings. We are live and welcome to another episode of African News Review. With me, as usual, is Comrade Milton Allimadi and our new partner in crime,
Am I?
Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Comrade.
I see Comrade Milton is
Yes,
repping Howard today.
Yeah.
Yes.
The bison, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So, we are talking about the news. So let's start with you guys. News from where you are. What's the major news item where you are? Starting with Lady.
Where would I start? Is it the flood, the loss of lives?
That's the question.
The fact that FEMA did not respond for over 72 hours, and somehow they're bringing Biden's name into the equation, like these people can't take responsibility for anything. Yeah. And of course, now the governor we have has just called for a special session, legislative session, to deal with redistricting. So what they want to make sure that they do is that they redraw the maps, the political maps, in such a way that although most of the country is upset with how they are handling the business of the people, they can still keep their majority in Congress. So they're trying to take out people like Representative Crockett. And the Supreme Court has said if you're redrawing for political reasons, it's legal. So we shall see.
Okay. We shall see. And Brother Milton, you're in the heart of the empire.
Well, there's always a lot going on, but I think perhaps one of the most critical ones is the Epstein papers. I think it's clear now that there are people that are very implicated that the White House does not want exposed. So rather than speculate, we can just point to things about why is it so important for the president, who always was insisting that everything needs to be exposed, now clearly reluctant to have everything exposed involving the Epstein papers. So, and the best part is that some of his own MAGA supporters are insisting that it be exposed. So I like the split. I like the split. When he bombed Iran, he had a lot of pushback from his own MAGA supporters. And now I like that the Epstein papers is also sparking that kind of pushback. So there are many interesting days ahead.
Okay. So, on this side of the fence, we're talking about the pound taking a beating, and also the fact that a group called Palestine Action has been proscribed, stretching the boundaries of freedom of speech in the land where Magna Carta was signed. And as a result, you had the first testing of the law, where 14 octogenarians, basically 83-year-olds, wrote to the Metropolitan Police to say they were going to test the law, and they stood before Gandhi's statue in front of Parliament, and they were subsequently arrested. And the take from the Metropolitan Police Commissioner was that the law has no limit on who can be arrested. So that is
interesting
the news as we see it on this.
And the law is basically to ban any pro-Palestine speech. Is that what it is?
Well, what they're trying to do is, this is a direct action group. So what they've done is just pour some paint on military aircraft that has been participating in activities over Gaza, and the government has deemed this as a terrorist act. And so they now, brought a bill before Parliament, and one of the most rushed bills ever. But now that bill is currently before the House of Lords. It looks like the House of Lords might just kick it back down to them to say this is rubbish. That remains to be seen.
So opposing
yes.
is terrorism, but exterminating Palestinians is not. Okay, I get it. Very good.
We're clear.
Yes, so that it's not lost in translation. That is, it's mind-boggling, but
no, it's desperation. The oligarchs everywhere are just afraid that the people are reaching the limit point.
Yeah, and the fact that the head of government here
it's unstable in the United States, in Britain, even in African countries where the elite have amassed so much wealth.
Yes. And so we start, speaking of African News Review, we'll start in North Africa and we go to the land of Algeria. The news comes from the Financial Times and it reads, Algeria is buffeted by winds of change in North Africa. New tension with the UAE, France, Russia, and Israel has jolted authoritarian regime. It goes in details. It says it was yet another setback for Algeria. The UK decision to back a Moroccan plan to govern the disputed West Sahara has left Algiers, the main supporter of the Desert Territory Independent Movement, bitter and beleaguered in the face of diplomatic victories of its regional rivals. And it just rehashes the old neocolonial tropes. It sends a very strong message that almost all the major powers are behind this. He said that is Riccardo Fabiani. It is evidence Algeria are isolated. Algeria's authoritarian military-backed government, giving a dog a bad name to hang it, says the autonomy plan to buy time for Morocco illegal occupation. And so the question is, where do you see, in the context of this article, three things mainly. One is Algeria's position on Western Sahara. Two is the article itself. What do you read into it? And three would be, what does this say for people who are pushing back against neocolonial and settler colonialism? You want to go, sister?
No, I'm going to defer to our brother Allimadi first.
Okay, no problem.
What are your thoughts, sir?
All right, so, obviously the article is so biased. It's, they're not even sophisticated in their bias, right? They refer to very early on, disputed. There's nothing disputed, The Sahrawis are occupied. There was nothing disputed when France was occupying, Morocco, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So why is it this disputed thing? There's no dispute. The Sahrawi want their independence. They refer to authoritarian Algerian government as if Morocco is some democratic paradise. It's amazing. Normally, at least the New York Times, they respect them. They're biased, but they're a little more sophisticated. They can trick, maybe even 80% or 90% of readers that they're not biased. But this one, anybody who's a smart reader can tell. And to me, the best paragraph was, quote, governments that favor the Moroccan plan, on the other hand, describe it as a credible solution to a long-running problem. A stalled UN referendum on independence for Western Sahara was supposed to have been held in 1992, but has been stymied by disputes. Going back to that magic word, dispute again. There's no dispute.
Yeah.
It was Morocco that prevented the referendum from being held. So where's the dispute?
Yes.
Yeah. So my overall assessment is this article is one of the most blatantly biased without any sophistication.
Brother, I think what you're doing here with African News Review is so instructive because regardless of the bias that is baked into every single story, every single article we go through each week or that you go through each week, I think that we should come to it understanding that there will be that bias. I mean, if we know anything about our history, your colonizers, your oppressors never want to see you thrive. And so they're always going to tell that story from their perspective. We've said it before, until the lion can write its own stories, the story of the hunt will always be told from the perspective of the hunter. And so having said that, I do appreciate these articles, particularly because you don't see them in everyday media, mainstream media, at least where I live. But it allows some of us who have that interest, and which should be all of us, to now go and do some further studies to better understand what's going on and how we need to move in the world. And so for us to be in 2025 and to still essentially have a colonized people, Africa, of course, I think Puerto Rico is a colony, and British, what they call them, British Virgin Islands, I think that's a colony as well. But the extent to which we still have colonies today, and this area of the Sahrawi people is considered a how do they call it? A non-self-governing territory.
Yeah.
You know, that in this day and age, we're still saying that a group of people do not have the right to govern themselves. Of course, as we get into other topics, we will see that Trump and pretty much the entire Western world feels that way about the entire African continent. But, you know, just understanding who these people are, understanding that they were colonized in 1884 by Spain under the Berlin Conference, understanding that the Polisario Front, which now has been shrunk to about 20% of what that land space was, because Morocco has taken over 80% of it. And then to show that Trump isn't even very original in what he comes up with, Moroccan government built a wall.
Yes.
It's over 2,000 kilometers separating the 80% that they have illegally taken over from the 20% that the Polisario Front is still holding on to. And those ones are more aligned with Algiers. And we need to go back and study the history and understand why Algeria is so invested in this, not just because of the proximity, but because of their very fight against colonialization and wanting to support the humanity of other people as well. And so when we look at Morocco and we look at what's happening in the UK with Gaza, and we understand that the US, right, in order to get Morocco in order to sign off on, hey, Morocco, yes, this is not disputed anymore, you own this land, pressured Morocco, or maybe Morocco was very interested in normalizing relations with Israel. That was part of the agreement.
Yeah,
so you see how all of these stories like interface and are connected. And bottom line is, it is going to require global solidarity to overthrow not just imperialism, capitalism itself. So, you know, Algeria having won their independence from France, but now with the strained relations with France, now France is like, okay, we're on the side of the Moroccans instead of on the Polisario Front and in Algeria. It's really interesting, but what Algeria and what the Polisario Front is fighting for is for these people to be able to govern themselves. And Morocco for the West is seen as an ally, if you will, because it is a very strategic place for the Western government to still have a footprint in Africa and to control what's happening in those areas. And of course, whenever you have to question what's going on, follow the money, because there are resources that are always part of these quote unquote disputes. And so what should our readers take from this? Yes, the article is this overflowing with bias, talking about Algeria being an authoritarian government and so on and so forth, but then also understanding why the Western powers are aligning with Morocco and what they intend to get out of it. Their decision making is never based on what's in the best interest of our people. It's always on what they can get out of it.
Brother Milton, you want to add
I
more to that?
also want to add the other implication That is the views of the US, the UK, and France that matter more than anything else. So, for example, the African Union almost universally supports the independence of the Sahara. But this article not even mentioning African Union position. It's the UK, the US, France, that's it. And referring to Algeria as quote unquote isolated. In other words, if you're not a satellite of the US, UK, or France, then you're automatically isolated. It is so preposterous. So our
But
readers
they're also speaking to what they do.
Absolutely. So our readers can learn how to read every other article for themselves by critiquing articles such as this.
You were going to say, Sister?
And Algiers, in terms of the Sahrawi people, has had the longest, settlement, if you will?
Yep.
Refugee camps.
In Algeria.
Some of those refugee camps have now had people living there for generations. Like my grandmother was here, and then my father, and then now me. And so how long, lasting this situation has been. And thank you so much, Brother Milton, for bringing up the fact that over 80 other countries have recognized Western Sahara as an independent nation. But even they right now are being pressured to pull back. And of course, we know that I believe the ambassador for Algiers to France either voluntarily left or was kicked out or something of that nature. So the relationship between Algeria and its previous colonizer, very, very strained at this point.
I went to those camps. Those camps actually operated better than a few African countries. The camps have schools. The camps have, no, it's true. They have hospitals, most of them manned by Cuban doctors working in conjunction with Algerians and Sahrawi. It's amazing. They actually have a parliament where most of the members are women, and they vote like parliaments are supposed to do. The leader they have their own autonomous administration. He just doesn't make decisions like many of the African despots we have. He actually works with his parliament. And they have one of the most educated population, refugees, but very educated, because they get a lot of scholarships from like the Scandinavian countries, from Cuba, and from countries that are not afraid to stand up against the Western position on the Sahrawi people.
So you're saying they're actually capable of self-governance? Is that what you're saying?
They're just waiting to kick the Moroccans out. So the same government that's already functioning can actually function in the spaces occupied by Morocco now. They're actually in the refugee camps, they're much more democratic than Morocco, the Kingdom of Morocco.
And of course, we see what Morocco is doing on the side where they have occupied. There's a lot of brutality going on, a lot of repression going on. So, I'm glad that they did publish this story, as biased as it is, because, again, for some of us, this might be the first time we are hearing about this area and about people.
There's even another part to it, which is because it appeared in the Money paper. It reminded me to go back to, there was an article posted a couple of years ago by, what's his name again? His name escapes me. But the title of the article is The New Colonialism. In there, it's listed all the wealth of the African continent, where they are and who is exploiting them. And it's instructive to read who is exploiting the phosphate, gold, and oil and gas potential in Western Sahara. It's all British companies and American companies. So when you see them coming together to say they've recognized this, it's because their economic interest is vested in that decision making.
Absolutely.
So this article came out timely because apparently maybe they want to move on something, and in order to sort of put it out there, they've gone ahead and said, you know what? Let's try and put Algeria in the limelight, as it were, and maybe we can just get by from what we what we need to do. And so it's very instructive, especially the fact that it's Financial Times. Because when I first of all saw them, like, what's Financial Times doing talking about, this is not The Economist. This is Financial Times talking about political, decision making. I'm like, okay, money. So yes.
It's situations like this just make me just question the efficacy of the UN. What the hell is the United Nations doing anyway across the world?
Yeah.
But then, of course, a deeper question for me is, where are the conversations amongst Africans and African leaders to resolve our own issues? Why are these external factors always coming into play? And again, as someone who raises chicken, the thought that came to mind was, can I imagine my chicken right now saying, we've got a situation. We're going to invite the coyote. We're going to invite the mountain lion. We're going to invite the fox to a meeting. No. We'll go to their den for a meeting to figure out how to resolve the issues in our chicken coop. Like, how is that going to work out? Just on a very basic level. How?
Just taking a quick break here on the African News Review podcast, but don't go anywhere. If you're enjoying our deep dive into the real stories behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern, we're here to debunk the myths and bring you the truth about Africa. Want to help spread the word? Share this podcast with your friends and leave us a review. It goes a long way in helping others discover the real Africa. Without further ado, let's get back to setting the record straight.
Never.
I know you asked the rhetorical question, but it beggars belief. Comrade, you were going to say?
I'm disagreeing. I'm saying never work out. It won't.
Yeah. I mean, we'll at some point, something more. The penny must drop. And I think in light of what is happening in Gaza, with the world now balking against the mainstream narrative, there might be a chance that sooner or later, once a dam breaks on a story, people are going to do the
No, the sister had said,
if
we go to their establishment and work through their rules, how will it ever work out? And that will never work out if we go through their rules. And I think in the type of conversations we have here, we're trying to instill a different way of thinking among our young people in Africa so they can take agency of their own path and use their own solution. And I've always said, in many times, even on this show, that if I'm a young African today, I would rather do something within my own country to affect change than to go all the way to Brazil, go through the thick forest and try to make it to Mexico. Many of them die along the way. Go through the Mediterranean, drown while you're trying to get to Europe so you can go work in toilets and kitchens or in those farms. If those are the choices, I would rather instigate something domestically. I'd rather do what the young people are doing in Kenya. Yes, it's risky, but many more young Africans die trying to cross the Mediterranean than the ones that are struggling right now on the streets in Kenya. I would prefer that approach instead.
So you've given us the perfect segue. For the next story, we go to The Guardian, and it talks about our dear leader. And it's from The Guardian, and the headline reads, "Shoot them in the leg. Kenya President anti-protest rhetoric hardens as death tolls rises." William Ruto has accused protesters of terrorism, violence, and 2 days after 31 people were killed in anti-government demonstrations. Kenya's President William Ruto has ordered the president to shoot protesters targeting businesses in the leg in a sharp intensification of his rhetoric days after 31 people were killed. They shouldn't kill them, but they should shoot their legs so that they break and they can go to the hospital on their way to court, Ruto said in the capital. I don't even know if that is worthy of response, but respond we should. What's your initial take?
So when I read this article, when I read the article, the image that came to mind was brothers and sisters in the Congo with missing limbs. And it made me think about the history of police and military forces in Africa across the continent. And in Kenya in particular, since that's where the story is based, tracing back the state violence against Kenyans from colonial times, the suppression of the Mau Mau under the British, the Saba Saba Day, marking the 1990 uprising for multi-party democracy, the way Kenyans were repressed under Arap Moi. So what we see, and of course we have many of our writers who've spoken eloquently about this, is President Ruto's rhetoric and actions continuing this trend of betrayal of Africans by our own leaders.
Yep.
And I'm very happy that increasingly African youth are rising continent-wide against these neoliberal oppression. But if we were to go back to Nkrumah's book on neocolonialism, that is that's exactly what we see operating right now, where you label protesters as terrorists and then using Western security frameworks, you oppress your own people. So you shoot all these people in the legs if that's what you do. If the soldiers are even good enough marksmen or women to get the leg and nothing else, or that they don't hit a major artery, what is your point? And the crazy thing is, Ruto, when he was running, he ran on this notion of youth empowerment, but somehow now has seemed to just cave to the whims of the West. Of course, we saw their involvement with Haiti. And so I hope that despite the cost of life, that we do have a generation that will rise up and fight. I don't feel like Africa can ever negotiate its way to peace. I truly believe that what you can't protect, you don't own. And until Africa can protect itself, we will continue to be the playground for these Western powers because we have what they need.
Brother Milton?
All right. So basically, as I indicated earlier, we're seeing the same struggle of the very wealthy elite all over the world, actually, now. So we see the U.S., the manifestation. We see, in fact, and it's somewhat related, but some people may not see the direct connection. Look at New York City, for example. You have a mayoral election. You have a Ugandan born of Indian ancestry. He comes there, he's polling at 10% in the beginning, but he goes to the masses, right? With young people helping him door to door, and he beats a candidate with a name recognition, a former governor, Andrew Cuomo, who spent millions of dollars. Just beat him. And then look at the reaction. The racism, accusation of anti-Semitism, accusations that he is a secret supporter of terrorism. It's not so much because of what they don't believe that. And by the way, this messaging is being promoted by the very wealthy people, the oligarchs, who would rather Cuomo, who actually had to resign because of multiple allegations of sexual harassment of the women employees who worked for him. They would prefer him to win. Or Eric Adams, the current mayor. They would prefer him to win, a guy who was saved from being tried and possibly convicted and going to prison by Trump, who wanted to use him as a tool to go after immigrants in New York. But then the judge said, okay, it's with prejudice when the charges were dropped, because you can't ever, so the judge removed the element of using Adams to blackmail him, you see? So that's the struggle in New York. The oligarchs are panicking that the masses may actually change the status quo. In Kenya, it's the same thing. Ruto is one of the wealthiest Kenyans. Uhuru Kenyatta,
Yes.
who was before him, one of the wealthiest Kenyans because of, his father, Jomo Kenyatta, basically taking all the land after the British
I was
left.
taken from his people.
Absolutely. So you have that struggle in Kenya right now. Unless they come up with a very creative way, this bullets thing is not going to work. Whether you choose to shoot their legs, whether you kill them like the 31 that have been killed, when they go home, they still face the same issues. They can't afford food. They can't afford fuel. They can't afford hospital because medical subsidy has been removed. They can't afford transport. So they're going to come back out to the street. You shoot them no matter how many times you want. Eventually, it will cost you, and you may be driven out of power. So that's not a solution that's going to work for Ruto. And I think to the extent we see change in Kenya, it's going to affect Uganda as well. And it's going to affect Tanzania as well. Neighboring countries that face the same issues and challenges,
So, one question would be, where does he get the backing from? Because obviously, the international community, well,
He was in the White House last year, remember?
Yes, playing going with daddy for his open work day. Yeah, open work day. He sat at the desk as well. He was grinning like a Cheshire cat. I suppose the question I'm posing is, at some point, even his international backers will say this is a step too far. Do you think that is, in light of what is happening in Gaza, there is such a bar?
Why do you think his Western backers are going to say it's a step too far?
Because he kills too many.
If he
kills too many, they'll replace him with another puppet.
Oh, okay. So, we're not changing anything. It'll just be a matter of switching out
the personality.
Okay, on that point. Because I was just going to say, they don't care about these youth.
No, they don't.
So at this point, if we can get rid of these Africans, these pesky Africans who keep having children when the rest of us are headed towards extinction, if we can get rid of them and just put robots and extract what we need, that might be their solution. So yeah, that was my question was, do they really care about the death of our people? No. So
which
you're
means,
just saying they would just replace him because he's a tool, he's a pawn.
So which means it goes back to what the good comrade said earlier. He has to come up with an imaginative solution to the problem. But it doesn't seem as if he's capable of doing so. So we're in a catch-22 situation. We can't really
he may not be allowed to. He may not be allowed to by the people that control him. He's a smart guy, but to come up with something imaginative, you have to give up some of what is now controlled by the powerful Western corporations.
And
go ahead.
And as we addressed, I believe last week or 2 weeks ago, the incredible crushing weight of the debt that Kenya has.
Yep.
And these cuts to education and healthcare and the sub is as a result of the IMF and World Bank and what's been imposed on him. So they are very much behind the scenes. And that's what I hope that as our young people are protesting, that we're able to see not just the Black person in front of us that seems to be making the decisions that are harming us, because definitely many of us are complicit, but that they can also see the puppet masters, if you will, in the background that are orchestrating a lot of chaos so that we can stop this love affair with foreigners are going to come and save us.
Right. No, the sisters hit it right on the head. It's the debt because you're squeezing so much of your population just to pay the interest on the debt alone. Forget about the principal. So what do? You borrow more money to pay the interest of what you already owe. So if you're doing that, you cannot expand your production. They have the perfect setup. In fact, it's actually, I would say in many respects, worse than colonialism. Because under colonialism, the colonial government, domestic and resident there, had to take some responsibilities, right? Here, no responsibilities, no obligation, therefore, relies solely on the military. Because if you renounce the debt, obviously, they'll find a way to kill you, just like they did to Thomas Sankara. So what do? You
Unless
squeeze,
we do it
of course, absolutely. And Ruto is not a candidate for that, definitely. But that is the ultimate solution, to do it collectively. To do it collectively, the people that are potential candidates, obviously they need to expand their circle, the Sahel states, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. If they get a total of like 10 African countries as a pack, they're in business. But yeah, that is the solution. Collective, renounce, and then say any new money, you have to allow us to put it in factories so we can manufacture. Because right now there's such a bind. So you come right into the IMF, World Bank, they'll give you money, but they'll say you can't do this with it. Continue producing tea, flowers, cocoa, not processing it domestically, right? So they keep you in the same bind. And you're so desperate for the money, you're going to take it. But if they can renounce it and say, if I get new money, I'm allowed to process my tea domestically, my cocoa, turn it into chocolate, that's a solution. Yep.
But we know that's not going to happen. So on Kenya, do you see any parallels with any other African country with regards to this manner of repression? Any other parallels?
Yeah. I mean, immediately what comes to mind is Nigeria for sure with SARS.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But, South African youth are out there as well. And yeah, so all over there are different ways that they're repressing it. But the youth are speaking up. They are standing up.
Well, at least we know the youth are they're on the job. And speaking of the youth, we now go to the next story, which is, I'm sure you guys will love this. It's linked to your gentleman on the other side. Apparently, lobbies linked to the story comes from The Guardian, actually. And it's titled, "The Lobbies Linked to Donald Trump Paid Millions by World Poorest Countries. Somalia, DR Congo, Yemen, among states forced to sign deals and barter their minerals for aid or military support." And there's the guy himself. Some of the world's poorest countries have started paying millions to lobbies linked to Donald Trump to try to offset U.S. cuts to foreign aid, an investigation reveals. Somalia, Haiti, Yemen are among the 11 countries to sign significant lobbying deals with figures tied directly to the U.S. president after he slashed U.S. humanitarian assistance. Many would remember the USAID is now defunct. Many states have already begun bartering crucial natural resources, including minerals, in exchange for humanitarian or military support, the investigation by Global Witness found. So, is this the new face of diplomacy? Cash for favors? Minerals for favors?
Well, I wonder whether this is actually worse than what was happening previously under the Democratic administration, where it was not explicitly done, where the talk was, oh, we want peace in Africa, blah, 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 but turning a blind eye to Rwanda's war of aggression against the Congo, because the beneficiaries of the resources plunder are the same Western, countries. So I wonder which one is worse? The one where there's explicitly saying, okay, work with this public relations company. We're going to hook you up to the White House. They'll invite you. You'll sign something there. And after that, we're going to get ABC of your minerals that we want.
So, one of the charges against African leaders is this notion of corruption. And I remember a 60-minute interview with Louis Farrakhan where they brought up, Nigerian corruption, and he just decimated them because these Western powers, as they call themselves, are actually the source of a lot of the corruption. I'm not giving African leaders a pass by any stretch of the imagination. I think that Americans and those who consider themselves lovers of justice, if they still exist, need to really look at what this man is doing in the White House and with the powers of arguably one of the strongest, if not the most powerful country in the world. He is running this country and the affairs like he is a mafia king. He's some kind of warlord. And you either kiss the ring or I'm going to punish you. There is no longer any kind of attempt to disguise this as anything other than strictly twisting people's arms. So, when you watch those movies where you now see people who are somehow affiliated with the mafia, they might not even be majorly in it, but now they can go take a whole block of restaurant entrepreneurs and say to them, you have to pay me this amount every month or else we're going to burn down your business or whatever. And they're strong arming people all over the place. And then usually who do they strong arm? It's those who they feel like they can exercise power over.
Mm.
So for these lobbyists like Haiti, yeah, you needed US aid. Okay. Pay me $450,000 a month for me to go and advocate for you. And I'm just saying to my people, how much rice, how much beans can you grow for $450,000 a month?
Yeah.
But he has unleashed and just made it very acceptable publicly this is not just grifting. This is wholesale, open, broad daylight robbery of the most vulnerable people. And because we don't yet believe that we can form alliances outside of our dependence on these countries, you find our leaders being so small-minded that they are falling for it. And I've never known, as a child in the school and all of that, I have never known a bully that if today they come and they get the orange from your lunch, will not come back tomorrow and demand the sandwich plus the orange. And then the third day, just take the whole lunchbox altogether. So the minute you start acquiescing, it's like over for you. And so people should be very concerned about what this man and those supporting him, including, a majority of the Supreme Court, who have said to him, whatever you do as president is legal. Because as Malcolm X said, the chicken will come home to roost. I see that with my chicken. I let them out. Once it gets dusk, I don't have to go and chase them back to the coop. They go back to their coop. They go back to roost. And so whatever he is inflicting across the world, we've of course already seen it with his incredibly evil bill. I'm not calling him what he branded it that they keep repeating. The people here in the United States are going to catch hell. And that includes MAGA. That includes all of them who are on Medicaid, who now they've signaled, once we deport or imprison all the quote unquote illegals, you're the ones that we're sending out to these farms to do work that we no longer have our free and unpaid labor to do. So anyway, it's horrifying to see how things are playing out. And it's just really concerns me that so many countries are feeling they don't have a choice. And so again, when I saw this week, the African quote unquote leaders who trooped to Washington, D.C., all too excited, be feted, quote unquote, by this man, only to sit down there as a grown man and have this idiot who speaks at a third grade level say, oh, where did you learn to speak English? Because he has like 30 words in his vocabulary. And you still sit there and grin. I mean, like, we got to get a backbone. And again, where is the African Union? Where is ECOWAS? Where, with all the intellect that we have in Africa, and certainly all the resources, we have to negotiate in a different way. We really do.
All
Brother
right, so
Milton?
let me give you my take. In a situation like this, I remember what Malcolm said about the United States and South Africa. He said, I'd rather deal with South Africa and the racist apartheid because they let you know their racism openly than the United States and its hypocrisy. So I use that analogy to say the Republicans and a person like Trump would be like apartheid South Africa back in the day. And the Democrats would be the United States that Malcolm spoke about, the hypocrisy. The 10 million Congolese were killed as a result of the so-called Democrats. I don't even know why I call them Democrats, turning a blind eye to the multiple invasions of Congo from Uganda and from Rwanda. So I think Trump gives us as African people an opportunity to see that they are actually the same, while if it comes with dealing with us. The Democrats, I might say, are different, of course, in the sense that they don't give the kind of tax breaks to the very wealthy that the Republicans give. But in the huge global sense and impact, I would say Trump reveals to the world the true nature of the United States because they voted for a guy like that anyway. You see, with all the manifestations, the baggages he had, the racism, the misogyny, the corruption, grandstands, and he made all this clear, and yet they still vote for him. So I think now Africans can see the nature of the country that they're dealing with. And it's, to me, it's so much the system. And I think Trump just happened to be there at the time that the system wanted to unleash the reactionary forces of oligarchy and capitalism. If it wasn't Trump, it would be somebody with a different name. But it's the system, and the system has now been exposed. And that's a system that we need to fight here in the United States. That's a system we need to fight in Africa as well. That's why I'm very actually hopeful by what is happening to Mamdani and his campaign in New York. I think that's a template we need to take all over this country. That's a template we need in Africa, because in Africa we have our own versions of the oligarchs. The leaders who were invited here, these were oligarchs, except maybe for the young guy from Senegal, where they're trying to, take a new course in Senegal. So I think what Trump does is explodes the illusion that we had friends in the United States, really. If that makes sense.
Yes.
And what I'm hoping that does is that it convinces us to look within for our solutions, to quit running to outsiders, however they are camouflaged, because these lobbyists have basically taken the role of the missionaries in the past. We come and we tell you we're here to do good and all of that. Well, just give us this and then we'll make sure this comes, you'll get salvation later or whatever it is that they were selling. But I think it was Desmond Tutu who said they came and told us to pray. We closed our eyes. When we opened our eyes, we had the Bible, they had the land.
Absolutely.
So, and I would just encourage if we have any young people or leaders who are who are saying, I need to diversify my thought process on this. Reading Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth right now, I think will be well worth it, just in terms of understanding the mindset that puts us where we are now. And even Ikwama's The Resolutionaries, because he talks about all of these issues, although in novel form, and hints at possible solutions, a different way of thinking through it, but looking into ourselves to solve our own problem.
Yes, and when Comrade was talking about the fact that Mr. Trump just shows the bare face of the United States, there was a book released a couple of years ago, actually almost a decade now, titled "The Looting Machine." This
Yes,
book
I remember that book. Right.
This book is very incisive into not just how the corporate oligarchy works, but how they manufacture all these dictators within the African space and then use them as a conduit to get access to our resources. So it's a very brilliant book. It's titled The Looting Machine. It's written by Tom Burgess. And for our next story, we'll go to the German broadcaster Deutsche Welle. And it's a two-pronged story. You have to bear with me. It reads, Nigeria faced new visitor restrictions. The U.S. State Department has said it's going to issue single entry 3-month visas for Nigeria in non-immigrant and non-diplomatic categories, rolling back the 5-year multiple entry visas. And then it goes into announce the new visa rules and what have you. A State Department memo from May indicated the U.S. was considering a travel ban on 36 other countries, including Nigeria. That proposed ban expanded has not fully been announced. Now we know it is. So your initial reaction to this ban, then I'll tell you why I said it's a two-pronged aspect to it. Sister, you want to go first? As a Nigerian, hopefully you don't have a Nigerian multiple visa or US multiple visa. Because I'll be careful to,
I know why you want to expose me on this Al Gore's internet. No, I have dual citizenship. You know what? As I read the article, it's what is underlying these policies. We know we saw the ban in his first term. Supposedly, all of these policies are being dictated by a need to protect the security of the United States of America. However, when we look at the sources of terrorism in the United States of America, they have little to nothing to do with the countries that he's targeting. In fact, the countries that are highest on the list for terroristic acts in America, he's in bed with them economically. When we talk about Saudi Arabia, we talk about the UAE. 15 of the 19 hijackers for 9/11 were Saudi Arabians. They were Saudi nationals. The UAE had 2 of the 9/11 hijackers. And so what does Nigeria or any of these other countries, quite frankly, that you're targeting have to do with supposedly, maintaining your security or looking for reciprocity? People who don't live in African countries may not understand what Africans go through to get a visa to come to European countries.
You want to tell them, please?
Literally, if you're able to get an interview date, which you can wait 6 months, 18 months, 2 years to even get a date, an interview date, people will line up the day before their interview. So those who have wealth will hire people to go and line up for them. You will get in there, you are paying more in application fees than the average Nigerian earns in an entire year. Well, so all of these Western countries make so much money just from application fees. Because just like when you apply to get into an apartment, whether they accept you or not, whether they reject or accept your application, you are not getting your money back. So it's a huge moneymaker. And of course, the vast majority are denied for any sorts of reasons. So this is also on many levels, there's the anti-Blackness part of it. There is the fear of the black and browning of the United States of America. We know that in the USA, people of Nigerian descent are the most educated group in the entire country by their own statistics. We come here and we add value. We are not a threat except for white nationalists who know that their children cannot compete with the average Nigerian immigrant that comes here.
Yeah.
But when you go from a 5-year multi-entry visa to a 3-month visa. What you do is people then have to keep reapplying, paying and paying and paying. And then, of course, you're also limiting the numbers of people from that country who are coming in. And so we don't see these kind of restrictions on countries that are predominantly quote unquote white. And so as I'm reading this whole article, I'm looking at the security claims versus the reality of who commits terrorism in the United States.
Okay.
I'm looking at the anti-Blackness embedded in the policy. I'm looking at the immigrant demographics, Black and brown versus white nations. And I'm looking at Nigeria as a strategic scapegoat, because this is also a way to maybe bend Nigeria, which what is it? 1 out of every 4 Africans is a Nigerian. Bend that country more to your will. So you single them out for bans and restrictions and so on and so forth without any real evidence. But the greater implication is the anti-Black geopolitics. And then for me, which I know I'm beginning to sound like, a broken bell or what, the clock or whatever, it's, will Africans turn inwards? The amount of money Nigeria spends in this country, even with the students who come here for education. I think at Harvard, they said something like 13.5% of all their immigrants, their students who are immigrants are Nigerians. Perhaps we can turn inwards and build our own institutions within our own continent.
Okay.
Keep our own brain cells in our own continent. So again, I hope that all these pressures cause us to come back to self, to heal.
Comrade?
No,
There's
very
a
good.
part I
Because
want
the
to...
sister
but
covered
go on.
almost all the bases. The issue of they're paying the fees, that's so outrageous. I think it's Namibia now that's insisting that if an applicant's application is rejected, their fees should be returned. So I think Namibia is starting a campaign for something like that. The only other point that I might add is this also is similar to the situation with the debt situation, where you can't act individually, otherwise the retaliation, you won't be able to live with how they'll retaliate. But if they had a collective position that if you're going to be subjecting Africans to application, immigration, discrimination, subjecting them to mass expulsion and all that kind of stuff, then African countries will retaliate against your citizens as well. If we had a system like that, I think they would think twice before they take those kind of drastic unilateral action, like having an Africa ban, for example, right? So what if the AU said, okay, so we have a collective action policy. If you're going to ban countries XYZ, since they're a member of the AU, you're also banned from every African country. But the problem is they're so politically and economically weak, they're so dependent that they won't even contemplate taking a position like that. But the ultimate solution is, as the sister said, we need to turn back inward. We need to do what China did. China was a punching bag of the West in the 1960s. Today, China is a global power because it used its own domestic resources to industrialize. Africa needs to do that. Nobody will kick Africa around. Surprisingly, that's something that can be done within 15 years, possibly. If they start using their resources to produce domestically, it will take less than 20 years for many of these African countries to be saying, okay, you know what? Now we are the ones that are going to be imposing these policies. U.S. citizens, you need to leave.
So the observation you both drew were very, very key, because in that piece, it specifically mentioned Nigeria. But what they failed to mention, there was another piece just immediately after this one I had. And if I just share it quickly with you, you'll see what I'm about to say. And it's, where is it? It's the reason for the ban was because Nigeria rejected U.S. pressure to accept deported
Yes.
Venezuelans.
Yes.
President Trump has threatened Nigeria with higher tariffs and visa changes. Nigeria has enough problems of its own, the foreign minister said. On Friday, the foreign minister, Yusuf Togot, said Nigeria would not bow to increased pressure to accept deported Venezuelans from U.S. President Donald Trump. Said Trump was attempting to strong-arm African nations. So you see that meeting he had in the Oval Office with those 5 tiny states was essentially a combination of this. Nigeria was invited, but Nigeria declined to go. The moment these guys came in, that's when the ban hit the airwaves that this is what's going to be. Because Nigeria said, why would they accept Venezuelans? Why? What's the point? And so when he was telling the Liberian president that, oh, you speak perfect English and whatever, it's the mind boggles. This is a country that you created out of the African space in 1847.
He doesn't know history.
In
But what you just
1847.
showed, brother, it does not change anything that the sister said in terms of what she laid out. I think whether they had that Venezuela thing or not, what she said still applies, not only to Nigeria, but to all the African countries that are being arm twisted, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it makes a mockery of this country's sovereignty that you want to pick up people that for some reason you no longer want around you, but you want them in someone else's spaces. And you're actually telling them you must take them. Otherwise, this is what's going to happen. I was just a quick segue. I was talking to my brother the other day and I was asking him a question. If the United States does not offer you visas or does not allow this kind of reciprocal cultural exchanges, what's the point of having diplomatic relations with them? What? They have one of the largest embassies, in a security sensitive location. They're actually open to the sea. And this kind of nonsense is allowed to fester. And yet you now have him now telling you, we want you to take our, I don't want to use the word, our cast-offs, and you must take them. Otherwise, come on. At some point, somebody must stand up to say
I'm not
no.
surprised that they do that, though. So if you want me to be honest with you, I'm not surprised that we do that. So I won't get outraged because they do that, because I expect them to treat African countries like that. I think we need to turn things inwardly and say, what is it that we need to do to prevent them from doing these kind of things? Or once they do these things, what do we need to do? That, to me, is the bigger question. What they do in terms of their dealings with African countries. Listen, at one time, they were exporting toxic waste to a number of African countries before it was exposed.
Yeah.
Toxic waste that they know would kill people if they bury here, they're exporting it to African countries. So if you know that they're capable of doing stuff like that, or in fact, dumping some of it in black populated areas within the United States itself.
United States, yeah. So I don't know what I was thinking.
I don't know if any of you have any notion of what the total figure is that African nations supposedly owe the IMF and the World Bank.
I think it's about 1.2 trillion.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. So I'm looking at just the area of tourism, not to include the numbers of Africans who are paying for their education, not on scholarships, they're paying for their education outside of the continent. What if Africans on the continent, and for those of us who are in the diaspora, decided that we will spend all of our tourism dollars, pounds, whatever your currency is, in Africa instead of Dubai and France and the USA and Canada and so on and so forth? How much could we recoup of our own resources? How would we build up our own industries? I'm just saying, I
I
have some of
endorse
the.
that 100%. I endorse that 100%.
I see people on my timeline, they go to UK, they're so proud to go to Harrods and come out with their Burberry and this and that. And then it's like, how did you contribute to your own liberation? And I know there are people hearing this right now who are saying, so easy for you to say you are in the US, you're living the great life. No, I'm not. I'm in Texas. I could be arrested by ICE any day and they don't need due process. But wherever we are, we all have a role to play. Those of us who are still out in the diaspora, we have a role to play. But those of us who are on the continent, I think are in the strongest position right now, just in terms of where we send our money, what we're doing with our resources, how we fight back. And so I would just encourage each and every one of us to say, what are we doing for our liberation? So if you have some money and you need to travel, if you can't make it to Africa, maybe it's to a Caribbean nation. But if you can get to Africa, go there and spend that money instead of continuing to go and patronize all these European countries and their establishments. We again have to be, I hate to quote him, and so I won't, but you guys would recognize some of the words. But if we want change, we need to initiate that change for ourselves. I don't want to quote him because he was racist towards us, but some of you know who I'm referring to.
Yeah, I know. So
No, I agree 100%.
yes, it's important that we bring all these news stories forward and, because this is what shapes our narrative, both of the continent and about the continent. And the more we speak about these things, the more we're conversant with what is going on around us and also, to bring said change, require change. So the question is, if people have found value in this, please stop by, share, and subscribe. And yes, I'm glad.
Can I ask our comrade a question just while he's on here? So we had Paul Robeson and others who initially went to the UN with the We Charge Genocide, and there's a pamphlet or a little book that was created. To the extent that we have this quote unquote international body, and we're talking about global solidarity, do you think it makes sense, or what would it look like if all of these countries that are being strong-armed in these ways came together and in a united front went to the United Nations and you're not asking for anything, you're declaring what has to be done? Would that is that an option? I'm just looking for, beyond us just talking about these stories, how do we begin to bring about change so that people don't become hopeless or feel like these are so insurmountable?
Right. Well, you know what they did? They really destroyed the possibilities of the United Nations realizing its potential by doing two things. The U.S. being the dominant contributor with its paycheck, using that to blackmail. And that's number one. Then number two, the veto, The veto sort of neutralized or castrated the General Assembly. Because if the General Assembly really had its day, a lot of the problems we have today would have been resolved a long time ago. So the General Assembly comes out with a resolution on Israel and Palestine. The U.S. vetoes it, and that's it. So the wills of billions of people around the world and hundreds of countries neutralized just by the U.S. representative raising his or her hand up like that and casting a veto. So they really killed what the UN really could potentially do in terms of helping to create a better world. But yeah, that's where it should be.
What would it take for the AU then?
AU also has a little bit of the same problem because 60% of their budget comes from outside. Yeah, I hope that the Sahel countries can take that as one of their initiatives, to create and broaden that body and make sure that Africans actually control it. So that's another way. They got to the African Development Bank as well. More than 60% of the subscription in the money that it actually has to lend also comes from outside. So they got us in a tight spot. The institutions that they know have potential to transform, they make sure they infiltrate. and neutralized.
So what I'm hearing you say, in a sense, looking at the UN, looking at these different countries, this notion of democracy is an illusion. Is there any
Absolutely.
democratic nation? Is there
Yeah,
any
it's smoke and
democratic
mirrors.
nation
It's smoke and
or
mirrors.
any democratic institution? Is there?
Right. Yeah, this is what Rodney said, right? Rodney said they are always busy thinking of how they can get one step ahead of us. So we need to be very busy thinking how we can stay 2 steps ahead of them. They look at the problem, in other words, they look at an African solution as a problem, and they come together and say, how do we eliminate this? Patrice Lumumba is a problem. He's saying to Belgium, we have to renegotiate these contracts to benefit my country. They said, no, this is a problem, because if he succeeds, other African leaders are going to ask for the same thing. We need to eliminate him. Kwame Nkrumah, he's supporting Patrice Lumumba. He's talking about uniting all Africans. That's a problem. We need to get rid of it. Boom. Sankara, he's saying Africans, grow your own food, so we're not dependent on food imports. That's a problem. So we need to figure out a way to be 2 paces ahead of them.
Yes.
And hopefully these are the types of conversations, obviously we want action beyond just.
Yes. But
the awareness is key. First, you're aware so that you're not buying into these lies and the propaganda, and then you can start thinking about how to move forward differently. Actually, as we're speaking right now, I'm looking at a picture of my maternal grandmother and my maternal grandfather, and back in the 50s and 60s in Nigeria, when they were blocked from accessing resources from the banks that were controlled by the colonizers. What they did in their community is they created a cooperative. And I actually have some of the receipts for loans that they gave and the reasons they gave the loans. And then when the people pay the loans back. So they created their own economic system, their own banking system. You can see where people are asking for resources to expand their businesses or resources to send a child to school, things of that nature. And then, of course, they would pay it back. And so we've got to go back and figure out what worked for us,
100%.
even if it was at a small scale, and then scale up.
100%, yes. I agree.
Like you both said, we need to be informed, and yes, information will continue to pass along on this channel. Again, it's important that we read these things not through the European lens, but through an Afrocentric lens. And why? Because, if they're trying to capture your mind, as the late ancestor would say, decolonize the mind first, then everything else will come onto it. Ungugu afiongo. It's important that we do this on a regular basis, which is why this channel and hopefully grow and be able to reach more people. And I say that to say thank you to both of you for coming in and sharing your thoughts, your insight, which is always important in order for us to not just understand how the machination works, but also to put this in proper context. So, sister, any last words?
Would respond to someone who is in the chat who might be an agent of chaos.
Oh, yeah. I've seen her. Awesome.
But I would say, again, just thank you for your discipline and the work that you're doing. And thank you to all who are watching.
I endorse that totally. I think the mind is very dangerous to the enemies around. The mind can really liberate us. We need to change, reorientate our thinking process, and know that we have the capacity to transform. I think if anybody has not seen Thomas Sankara, The Upright Man, please go and watch that documentary on YouTube. You can see even the eye of the citizens, Burkinabe, listening to him talk. They believe in themselves after they heard him because he convinced them that they could change their own destiny. If every African thinks like that, we can do it,
Yes. Yes, speaking of one great African to another one, Kwame Nkrumah once said, we never faced east nor west, we face forward. And in order to do so, you have to be clearly informed as to why that is the case. So until next week, we say good night and God bless. That's a wrap for this week on the African News Review podcast. We hope you are leaving with a clearer, more truthful picture of Africa. Remember, every story has another side, and we're here to uncover it. Don't forget to join us next Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we continue to challenge the narratives and reclaim Africa's voice. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeing Africa for what it truly is.